Hello and welcome to the Three Books for Hearts and Minds podcast. I am Philip Schiavone and the host with the most to say about books and book reviews, Byron Borger. Byron, how are you doing today?
Hello, everybody. I am doing good. The weather is beautiful here in South Central Pennsylvania. I guess it's nice over there in Shippensburg, Phil.
It's nice enough that I am pining to get outside with my girls here tonight. Our daily walks have begun again, and they got me a scooter for Father's Day, this most recent Father's Day. So I scoot around the neighborhood on my scooter.
Oh, what fun. Oh, that's good. Good for you. Well,
Yeah.
we'll scoot around a little bit tonight. Yeah, it's nice. Early May. We're excited.
Yes, it's great to be here, and I'm excited to get into some books that you have for us today. And we're excited to highlight a certain publisher as well. Is that right, Byron?
Yeah, that's right.
So get us right into it.
Okay, we're going to celebrate today a publisher that is dear to my heart, a little boutique outfit in Lancaster, Pennsylvania called Square Halo Books. Square Halo has a couple of dozen books in their catalog, unlike hundreds like big presses do. They're an independent press owned by a couple of friends of mine, and their managing editor, main editor guy, and art director is a guy named Ned Bustard. I want to tell you about three books. We only do three books in this podcast, but I'm going to tell you about three books that Square Halo has done. All three mean something to me. Two have a connection to me. So that's how I figured I'd share, Phil. And here's where I want to start. I want to tell you about this because Ned Bustard, their art director and editor, also makes his living as a graphic designer. And he's done some generous work for us. He's a real believer in hearts and minds. And he created the little logo for our three books for hearts and minds podcast that you put together, Phil. So when people are looking at the podcast little thing and they see the little logo there, that comes from Ned Bustard, and it's of course co-sponsored by the CCO, and you, Phil, the host, and me, Hearts and Minds. So it's a great little collaborative project, and Ned designed that little thing. Now here's what he did. And this is going to lead into my discussion of the first book. For those that are watching this, you'll notice that his little logo for our Hearts and Minds podcast is actually stolen from this book. It's the same cover and typography from this book called A Book for Hearts and Minds, What You Should Read and Why. You probably know this, Phil, but for listeners that might not know this story, this is kind of a book that is sort of a fun story. At our 30th anniversary, which was almost 12 years ago now, but at our 30th anniversary, Ned and his colleagues that co-own the Square Halo outfit decided, Ned and his wife, Leslie, and two other folks decided to come over to our store and wish us well, celebrate. I'm like, okay, that's cool. They're customers and they're good friends, and all four of them were going to come, and that's kind of nice. And they showed up and they brought some high-end cupcakes, like from some cupcake store. It was really sweet and really nice. And I thought, oh, this is great. And then they bring in the books, and they unveiled this book that they had done in our honor without telling us. I had no idea they were working on this. They called dozens of famous Christian scholars or writers that I have written about, or friends of mine that they know I trust, and asked them each to replicate the Book Notes newsletter that I do every week for our bookstore called Book Notes. I just go on and on about a topic, and they used to do this more than I do now, but I used to do themes, best books on missions, or the best books on prayer, or the best books on politics. And I would go on and on naming these different books and describing a little bit about how they got to be written and their connection. And so it was a really informative column, an essay about a topic. Well, they asked a whole bunch of people, N.T. Wright on the best books of the New Testament, Calvin Servild, books on the arts, books on history, books on literature, the best memoirs. Some of these authors are actually well known, like N.T. Wright, Gregory Wolfe, who at the time edited Square Halo Image Journal. Dave Gushee, the famous ethicist, Karen Swallow Prior. I mean, it's great writers, Andy Ashworth, Dennis Hack, Steve Garber. Each did a contribution about us and writing what they think are the best books people should read. So if you want to know what to read next, what to read and why, this book, which is annotated with the actual book covers, Ned put in the pictures the way I do, in our book notes, and just did this great book. He took a chapter that he had taped of me giving a talk about books, and he adapted an opening chapter from me. And it doesn't exactly sound like my writing because he adapted it from a talk years ago off of a cassette that he recorded. But it's me doing my thing about why reading is an act of discipleship and an act of loving God and an act of mission, what reading can do for us. So I'm in there. He wanted to put one of my contributions in there as one of the writers, one of the chapters. So he took a piece I wrote years ago on environmental science books, ecology books, why Christians should care about stewarding the earth. And so that's the chapter that I did in there. So I'm in here, what you should read and why, a Festschrift honoring the work of Hearts and Minds Bookstore. I thought and used to say I'm the only bookstore in the world that carries this thing because it's about us. There's all kind of blurbs by other famous people thanking us and congratulating us on our 30th years, and that's pretty darn cool to see the people that wrote little tributes and stuff apart from the chapters. But what I later found out is that some other bookstores are carrying this thing. Warren out at Eighth Day Books, which is one of the best bookstores in the country, in Kansas, he carries it. The Regent College Bookstore in British Columbia, they carry it. So I've talked to other booksellers, and they say, "Oh yeah, the essays here are great. It's congratulating another bookseller, a partner in crime," they would say, or a competitor, they might say. But the content in here of what to read and why you should read those particular books by experts in those fields. Brad Fry is in here, all kind of people that we like and admire saying what you should read next. So Ned borrowed this little logo here from the design of the book cover to become our podcast logo. So thanks, Ned, for doing this book. Thanks for surprising us 30 years ago. When he brought it in, my first thought was it was like one book that he made for us. And Beth and I are like, "Oh, isn't that sweet?" Then they started bringing in the boxes of them, which we now have to sell. So 10 years later, we still have bunches of them. We had to buy the darn thing. So yeah, there's a don't look a gift horse in the mouth, So now we have stocked these books and we want to sell them. And if you need a tool to help you know what to read, why to read it, what to read next in any imaginable topic, almost science, faith, art, politics, you name it. There's good stuff in here, and we are happy to tell you about this book. So right there is where we get our logo for our podcast, and right there is a book that is kind of fun to tell about, even though it's a couple of years old, a book for hearts and minds.
Man, what a great resource. I mean, you and I are obviously both book lovers, and if you're tuning into this podcast or this video, you obviously are a book lover too. That is a book lover's dream right there in book form. And particularly, my lens is always campus ministry, and that's also a campus staff person's dream heading into the summer when you're trying to think through what should my students be reading and what are their interests. Well, here's a resource that you can hand out to literally anyone, and they can peruse it, pick a book themselves. You can join them in that endeavor. And so, if you are a leader of any kind, leading a campus ministry or a Sunday school class or a summer book club, gosh, Byron, this is just a perfect book with perfect timing in this season of commencement and graduation and all of that, which I believe segues pretty well to our next book
Oh,
concerning
that was nice. That
commencements
was
and
sweet.
graduations. Byron, what do you have next for us here?
Well, as I say, Square Halo in Lancaster does a lot of books. Much of what they do, they tend to do books, not exclusively, but largely books about the arts. Ned is known in what used to be called SIVA, Christians in the Visual Arts. He's a woodcut design linograph guy himself. And so most of their books are about the arts. But they did another book that is not about the arts, but they did this book for me. It was a book I edited. Most people don't know that Hearts and Minds Bookstore, Byron from there, actually edited a book myself. And so people sometimes say, "What's a good book to give to college students when they're graduating?" We got lots of gift books to give to high school graduates, but a college grad, like, what do you give them? And we really didn't have a lot of good suggestions. So I put together a book. I called it Serious Dreams, Big Ideas for the Rest of Your Life. It's a small little compact volume. And I went to Ned over at Square Halo and I said, "You guys want to do this? I don't get any royalties out of it or anything. It's just a labor of love." But what I did in this thing is I went to a bunch of Christian college graduation speeches. I didn't actually go there, but I listened to them online, found authors that gave great graduation commencement speeches, and put them together in one volume. The speakers are everybody as diverse as the famous philosopher Nicholas Waltersdorf from Yale, to Steve Garber, my friend Richard Mao, Dr. Richard Mao. John Perkins does a great essay in here. Amy Sherman did a piece out at Malone that was just wonderful. I did a chapter in here when I was a commencement speaker at Geneva College, their graduate program out in Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania, on being sons and daughters of Issachar. And I was all rousing and told the history of ministry in that place and why we should make a difference in our careers and callings to understand the times and know what God's people should do. And people asked for copies of it afterwards. And I thought, oh, it was a pretty good talk, but I didn't think I needed to give them a copy, and I didn't really have my notes written out. So I wrote them all out and then thought, well, how could we get this published? And I said, well, we'll put it in an anthology of other such speeches. And I started finding other ones that were even better than mine. They were really, really good. Amy Sherman's is brilliant. As I said, John Perkins's is great. Claudia Beversluis was a dean up at Calvin at the time, and she gave the commencement speech, and I watched it, and my daughter was a student there, and we watched it online because we knew some of the kids graduating that year, and it was wonderful, based on a poem by Wendell Berry. And so, just for fun, Phil, for your podcast listeners here, I'd like to read just a little bit of this so you can get a flavor of why you might want to give a book like this to a college grad. In her speech, Claudia Beversluis, based on this Wendell Berry poem, she ends up saying something like this. She's talking about seeds. It's a poem about planting seeds. And she says, well, what do we do tomorrow? Especially when it seems that there's no clear roadmap after graduation. What do you do? Well, just start by finding one small place to plant a seed. Every time your gut aches and your heart breaks because of the wounds in the world, because of the vastness of injustice, and you feel the pain of it, especially for and with others, you're planting a seed. Find a place to share the pain. Every time you stand with astonishment and awe at the gifts God has given to us and share your amazement and gratitude in some way, you're planting a seed. Find a place to be astonished and grateful. Every time you gravitate towards a place where you recognize Christ's redemptive work and you join in that work in some small part of God's world, you're planting a seed. Every time you gather together and make God a little more believable to others, a little more visible because of how you worship or work or love, you are an agent of renewal because you're planting seeds. Graduates, nothing done in the name of Jesus Christ, no seed planted in God's name is ever wasted. A seed is not designed to sit on a shelf in a little lucite case next to your diploma and tassel. It becomes a gift, your gift to the future, only when it's planted. And then she says, there's a lot of comfort in this, even when you have no idea what tomorrow will bring you. Because if we offer our everyday lives to God who made us and loves us, roots will grow and they will yield fruit in due season. God will take care of the growth. Well, isn't that kind of stuff nice? I mean, these kind of inspiring sermons and messages, inviting students to have faith and courage, to invade the world with the gospel message, to be agents of salt and light, or in this case, planting seeds in many ways, whether it's pain or joy, gratitude or work. Every one of these chapters is a winner. I could tell you about all of them, but they're all really, really nice. This is great for college graduates finding their way into the world. I know some people that have read it just because they like it. I had a couple of customers that once said, we're going to give it to our high school seniors that are going off to college and say, this is what we're looking for. 4 years from now, this book should make sense to you. And so they even gave it to high school seniors. I didn't see that coming or expect that. But anyway, this is a good one. Wanted you to know about it. Serious Dreams, Bold Ideas for the Rest of Your Life. It's the only book of its kind. It's got some discussion questions that Ned and I put together, little acorn things, some oak leaf pictures in it. It's nicely designed. Ned did a good job on it. We're real proud of it. Serious Dreams, Bold Ideas for the Rest of Your Life. So that's a Square Halo title. Now, I got one more Square Halo title I want to tell you about. Can we do one more?
Yeah, that sounds great, Byron. Lay it on me.
I told you that Ned does books on the arts, essays about aesthetics and creativity, really nice books, academic ones and more basic ones. He has one on music. He has one on being a performer for God. And then he's done some art books themselves, like coffee table books. Well, this one I'm about to show you, Phil, hold on. I wish the podcast people could see some of this because there is nothing like this in print. Ned decided to make, a children's Bible story books that have like pictures mostly and a little bit of text. He decided to do a storybook Bible for adults. It is called Revealed, a little bit oversized. It's called a storybook Bible for grown-ups. Every page is illustrated with a black and white illustration that he developed, woodcuts or artwork from all different people of all different eras, some of them old, some of them complicated, some of them real simple. What he did with this is he has the biblical text on one facing page, then he has the artwork on a whole other page, and then he has a description from the artist describing, which is almost like a meditation on the passage and why they did the art the way that they did. I mean, it is really moving. It's stark, it's black and white. And I'm going to be honest with you, a little bit of it's modern art. Like, look at that weird modern op art stuff. That's for Luke 24, The Road to Emmaus, believe it or not. Here's Stephen Prince on Glorifying God in Your Body, a black woodcut illustrator, Stephen Prince, who's pretty famous. What he did with this is he tended to pick stories that you wouldn't put in a children's Bible, if you get my drift. There is sex and violence galore in the Bible, and understood redemptively, it gives you a proper understanding of the fall and the brokenness and the horror of the sinful world that we've created, and the beauty and joy and awesomeness of the good creation that's being redeemed. So with this creation fall story, there's a lot of good stuff, but there's a lot of ugly stuff too. And he did not shy away. So there is sex, and there is violence, and there is wonderment, and there is glory. It is called Revealed, a storybook Bible for grown-ups, published by Square Halo Press over in Lancaster, an art coffee table book that you could use to illustrate. Here's the head of John the Baptist on a platter with Salome, sort of an X-rated version of Salome. Am I allowed to show this right here? So there is some amazing art in this piece to reflect on and to get in between the lines of the Bible, so our lives can be captured by this big drama, glorious and messy as it may be, known as the Holy Bible. Revealed. It's a gem. Square Hiller Books. They're helping us out with this podcast by helping design our logo. And so we wanted to give a tribute to some of the good books that they do. 3 books for hearts and minds.
Yeah, fantastic, Byron. This will be absolutely no surprise to you, even though you surprised me. You didn't reveal to me beforehand what that third book would be. But mutual friend of ours, as well as listener to the podcast, Sam Levy, and I were having a dialogue just this past week on how much we both were seeing the need for art to be more a part of our dialogue around theology. And we were having a great back and forth on just this need and this desire for more art. And my mind went to that book, Byron. I have that book. I would lay it out on my Monday night Bible studies in my house, and you would just see students just stop and just gaze at the photos and say, "What is this?" And the discussions afterwards. So I'm a huge fan of that book. It is timely to a personal conversation that I am having with one of my best friends, and I would agree with Sam that it's a cultural need right now for the church to engage more with art when it comes to discussions of biblical literacy, theology, response to the current culture. It's just a need. It's a lack maybe in the capital C church right now in engaging in that way. So really appreciative of that. And I'm also, just to chime in on Serious Dreams as well. And I think I actually responded to you with this exact feedback of Serious Dreams. I read it, I can't remember if it was right before or right after my first daughter was born. And my response to that book was, it gave me hope for Kaylee. It gave me hope for my daughter that there's a world that she is entering of Christians thinking this seriously about their education, about their vocation, about the dialogue around that. And it gave me a sense of hope of, oh man, whatever she grows up to be, there are people with serious dreams about that and how it relates to the kingdom work. And I remember just reveling in my hope and my prayers for my first daughter at the time. So even as a parent, it reflected well on my reading in a way
so
that I wasn't
beautiful to
expecting.
hear, Phil. That is just beautiful. What a story. That does me, as one who compiled this thing, just a blessing to hear. that it could have that sort of ramification. And you and I both know that this holistic vision of the kingdom coming and the artful understanding of redemption and the hope and education and vocation and that thing that you just said, we learned that from the CCO. And they're the proud co-sponsors of this, the Coalition for Christian Outreach, the campus ministry organization. So hats off to them too for allowing us to kind of take up their space with doing this podcast for their staff and for others that are supporters of the CCO, because they really are an agency that evangelizes college students to transform the world with this kind of a vision. So if you like what Hearts and Minds does, if you like this podcast, a lot of it comes from our days back with the CCO. And Phil, I'm so glad you're continuing to work with them. So that's who you are, for those that don't know, staff director for the CCO.
Yeah, thanks so much, Byron. It's a pleasure to partner with you. It's a pleasure to partner with so many that share the same interest in growing our minds for the Lord, but then, of course, having that bleed into our hearts, into our everyday lives, as you read from that one section too. And so, and I also just want to echo the thanks to our friend Ned. I really appreciate the artwork he's done for this podcast, and of course for the book as well. And I'm so glad to be able to share and honor him here. So. Byron, anything else to close out with before I close this out?
Nope, not a thing.
Okay, well, thanks so much for those reviews of those books. Thanks so much to you, our listeners, and to our watchers of this podcast. If you would like to order these books, the first thing in the episode description will be the link to the order form, and we would greatly appreciate not only your reading and engaging of these books, but your support for the Hearts and Minds bookstore there in Dallastown, Pennsylvania. Feel free to share and like these episodes. That helps us get a greater reach of listeners with this. And also, feel free to contact us. I'll have our contact information if you have any questions about Hearts and Minds Bookstore or the Coalition for Christian Outreach and what we do in campus ministry. Please do feel free to contact us through our email addresses. And of course, read these books. We would love if you read these books and engaged with us. Feel free to give either one of us feedback on what you were thinking in reading these books. We would love to hear how it had an impact on your life, just as I love to share on this podcast, how these books have an impact on me, the ministry that I work for, and others. So with that, this has been the 3 Books for Hearts and Minds podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in.